Good morning, students. I am Dr. N.R. Madvi, Professor and Head of the Department of Economics, Mahatma Phule Art, Science and Commerce College, Parmel. Today, I am teaching you the first module of our subject, that is Business Economics, New Economic Policy 1991. The year 1991 is one of the most important landmark in the history of economy of India. Public sector enterprises the very important role in the creating the employment and providing several goods and services at very low cost of the production. However, due to the management of resources, lack of accountability, and the excessive focus on social objectives, many public sector enterprises made losses, making the economy more market oriented and expanding the role of private and foreign investment, the making the Indian economy more market oriented and expanding the role of public sector and private sector. The government of India starting the open the economy for the globe. Dr. Manmohan Singh is considered to be the father of new economic policy, NEP of India. Manmohan Singh introduced the uh, new economic policy on July 24, 1991. The main objective behind the new economic policy was the economy globalization of the Indian economy, then to control the inflation rate and move the economy towards the higher economic growth rate and build the sufficient foreign exchange reserve. The another objective of the new economic policy is removing all kinds of unnecessary restrictions in the public sector enterprises. It wanted to permit the international flow of goods and services, capital formation, human resources, and technology to the various industries without many restrictions. It wanted to increase the participation of private players in all the sectors of the economy. That is why the reserve number of public sector government were reduced. As of now, there are only three public sector enterprises are reserved for the public sector. So these are the main objectives of the new economic policy. That is the main objective was to plunge economy into the arena of the globalization, then reduction the inflation, then high economic growth rate, and build the sufficient foreign exchange reserve, and removing all unnecessary restrictions which was faced by the Indian economy. So these are the main objective behind the acceptance of the new economic policy 1991. Then what are the reasons for implementation of the new economic policy? There are three reasons for the implementation of the new economic policy, such as fiscal crisis, balance of payment crisis, high inflationary pressure. The fiscal crisis arises due to the expenditure of the government is higher than the revenue of the government. Means when the public expenditure of the government is higher than the public revenue of the government, there is fiscal crisis is existence in the economy. This was main reason for the implementation of the new economic policy. Then second is balance of payment crisis. What do you mean by balance of payment? Balance of payment is a systematic record of all economic transactions within the country. There are various accounts of the balance of payment, such as current account, capital account. These are two main accounts of the balance of payment. On the current account, the Indian economy is always shows the deficit because our export is less than import. That is, import of goods and services are always higher than the export of the goods and services. Therefore, there is the deficit in the balance of payment. Means balance of payment was also the main reason for the implementation of the new economic policy. Then high inflationary pressure. At the time, the prices of goods and services was increased at the very high rate. That is, at the time, the inflation of our Indian economy was almost 10% of GDP. So these are the basic reason for the implementation of the new economic policy, that is fiscal crisis. Expenditure of the government is higher than the revenue of the government. Then there is a deficit in the balance of payment, huge deficit in the balance of payment, particularly the current account balance. Then high inflationary pressure, inflation was very high at that time. Then the government of India started the macroeconomic stabilization measures such as fiscal correction, then improvement in the balance of payment and control of inflation. The fiscal, in case of the fiscal correction, government tried to reduce the government expenditure and increase the various sources of the revenue, through which the government expenditure is reduced and revenue of the government is increased. As a result of this, the gap between the expenditure and revenue is reduced. Then improvement in the balance of payment. The government of India undertook various monetary and non-monetary measures to correct the balance of payment disequilibrium. The India's balance of payment is always deficit, or there is a disequilibrium in the balance of payment, because the import of goods and services is higher than the revenue of the export of the goods and services. Then third is the control of the inflation. The main measure of the new economic policy is to control the inflation rate. For that purpose, the government has taken particularly use of the monetary measures and also the fiscal measures. Then economic reforms. The economic reforms refer to the fundamental changes that were launched in 1991. With the plan of liberalizing the Indian economy, the Prime Minister of India, Narsimha Rao government in 1991 started the economic reforms in order to develop of the Indian economy. There is a need of the economic reforms in at that time because of the poor performance of the industrial sector, adverse balance of payment, then increase in the fiscal deficit, then inflation and Gulf War. These are the reasons which are needed for the economic reforms. Poor performance of the industrial sector and public sector also. The public sector and industrial sector are incur the huge losses. Then adverse balance of payment means our balance of payment is deficit or disequilibrium. Our export is very less, and export is also only the essential goods and services. These are the need of the economic reforms in the Indian economy. The reform bring the various arena of the private sector in the growth of the Indian economy, such as the policy measures. Indian policy changes were proposed with the regard to technology upgradation. The government of India policy was focused on the technology upgradation, industrial licensing, then removal of the restrictions on the private sectors, then foreign investment, foreign trade. In the form of this, there are the various economic reforms were started by the government of India. These essential features of economic reforms are known as liberalization, privatization, and globalization, commonly known as the LPG policy of the government of India. Since then, there is a large economic reform started in Indian economy. There are two types of economic reforms, such as need of the economic reforms, then new economic policy such as the stabilization measures, then structural reforms were introduced by the government of India. In case of the stabilization measure, the correcting the adverse balance of payment and tackling with inflation. These are two stabilization measures started by the government of India with the help of the monetary policy and the fiscal policy of the government of India. Then structural reforms measures such as improve efficiency and removing the trade restrictions. Improve efficiency. Whatever the efficiency of industrial sector was very less. The workers are not efficiently working in the industrial sector. Therefore, the main focus was on to increase the efficiency of the worker in the industrial sector, and second is the removing the trade restrictions. There was huge duties on. There was huge import duties. Therefore, the export duties also. Therefore, there is the adverse balance of payment. So these are the points which are important in case of the new economic policy. Then there are the three types of measures such as liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Okay. Now this is for today's lecture. This is sufficient. Next, in case of the liberalization, privatization, and globalization, I will teach in the next period. Okay. Thank you.